afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session of the Western and Southern Area Planning Committee on today, Wednesday, the 12th of August 2020. My name is Councillor Simon Christopher. I am the chairman. I have to tell you that the council has suspended face-to-face meetings since the introduction of COVID-19 restrictions. New regulations now enable decision-making processes to continue in accordance with government guidance on social distancing, and this meeting is being conducted under new rules for remote meetings. Following changes to the legislation, a recording of the meeting will be available following the meeting. We will now have a roll call of members. Councillors David Gray and Councillor Peter Barrow have apologised. Councillor Kelvin Clayton, are you in attendance?
I believe I am, Chair, yes.
Thank you for your confirmation. Councillor Sue Cocking?
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Councillor Jean Dunseith?
Here, Chair.
Councillor Nick Ireland?
Present.
Councillor Louis O'Leary? I think he's apologised. Councillor David Shortell?
Present, correct, Chairman.
Councillor Sarah Williams?
Present.
And Councillor Kate Weller.
Good afternoon, Chairman.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the officers who are producing the meeting behind the scenes. The committee has a number of written representations submitted in accordance with the amended speaking protocol for planning committee meetings. These will be read out by an officer not involved in the application and taken in the following order: objectors, supporters, councillors, applicants and agents. Just to reiterate in terms of the order of consideration of an application for those joining us this afternoon, there will be a presentation by the planning officer, including any updates since the report was published. A named officer will then read the public written submissions. The case officer and other specialist officers will respond on any points of clarification arising from public participation. The committee will then debate the application. Please notify myself using the chat function if you wish to speak. The case officer and any other specialist officers will clarify any points that are necessary for members. I will confirm the proposer and seconder before proceeding to any vote. The vote will be conducted by a roll call of members. We have officers involved in today's meetings, including Anne Collins, Area Manager, Western and Southern, Darren Rogers, Enforcement Manager, Joe Riley, Senior Planning Officer, Phil Crowther, Solicitor, etc., Alison Sharp, Chelsea Gollage, Support Officers, Denise Hunt, the Democratic Services Officer, will be clerking the meeting. So, without any further ado, we will now proceed to item 6E, WD/D 19-03186, Homestead Farm, Main Street, Bovenhampton, Bridport, and the case officer is Darren Rogers. Good afternoon, Mr. Rogers.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Committee.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is what's called a Section 73A application, Chairman, that seeks to vary the plans list of a planning permission that was previously granted for the redevelopment of this site following an enforcement investigation to begin with, allegations that the scheme was not being built in accordance with the approved plans, which initially we didn't find at fault. And then as the project has since gone on, there's been, as I've set out in the background of the report, Chairman, a number of non-material amendment applications which were approved to begin with. But then the last non-material amendment application that we had last year, what was proposed as part and parcel of that in terms of seeking to retain the building as built compared to as approved, along with some other modifications to the scheme as a whole. We felt that we couldn't deal with that as a non-material amendment application, and that non-material amendment application was refused. That's not to say that planning permission was refused, but the changes that sought as part of the last NMA, non-material amendment, towards the end of last year, the cumulative changes to that we didn't accept as being acceptable as a non-material amendment. That left the applicant with the only option to submit what's called this Section 73A application, seeking now to regularise the building as is now built and is intended to be completed. And that's what this application, in terms of the variation of conditions related to the plans list, seeks to regularise. So this is the site here, Chairman. It's known as Homestead Farm. The red line incorporates the whole of that area, and I've just put a red line across the middle part of it, essentially, just to show that the built form of development is largely taking place in here, and the residential private garden, private allotment area that's intended to be laid out is located here. This is Duck Street, which is a private narrow lane that slopes down from Main Street. So this is effectively in the heart of the Bothenhampton village. And you've got the terraced properties that form the historic core and character on the north side of Main Street, which are accessed by a higher footpath level to the road. To the east is the hall, and to the south lies Spring Farm Nurseries and Primrose Cottages, accessed via this private access drive down Duck Street. This shows the site in relation to the village centre, a bit more wider. So you can see this is Hollow Way here off the main road that links Crown Roundabout to East Road, and you've got Morrison's on the west side of this. So this is Bothenhampton Centre. This is the application site, and it incorporates these two pieces of land as one large area red line. Duck Street located here, Main Street, and there's the village hall. This shows it in relation to nearby listed buildings. So the buildings outlined in brown are listed buildings. And what I've also shown here, Chairman, is the development boundary and the conservation area. So land within this area here is all within the development boundary and the conservation area. This area is outside the conservation area and outside the development boundary, but largely that's where many of the ancillary garden structures are intended to be built. We're dealing with the whole site, but primarily the building as built is located here in an inverted kind of letter Y. This shows the aerial photograph that shows it before the site got developed. So in effect, we're talking about this large piece of land located, as I'm showing you with my arrow. This shows the former farmhouse building that was parallel, should I say, to the road in terms of one building, and then the main house was perpendicular to that main part. And this is Main Street running through. And this shows a bit more detail of that. So there's the one building that was running parallel to Main Street, and then a series of other buildings dropping from that downwards, given the slope of the land. You can see here, Chairman, there was an old farm access gate that was located roughly there, and an old building marked here. This is the hall and Duck Street located down here. I thought it useful to show these photographs. This was before the site got planning permission in 2017 for its redevelopment, and you can see this is the old farm building located here, with the farmhouse just at right angles to this building. You can see the main farmhouse from the other side located here, and you can see how it staggered down given the slope of the land, and you can see how it's staggered down here. So that was the building, and this was the old kind of shed or garage structure situated, and there's the access next to the building. The Main Street is here, and the properties to the north of Main Street on the raised footpath level, you can see where the cars are. They are significantly higher than this street. The applicant has named the buildings. There's a series of buildings, but in effect, it is one large house. So the old barn potting shed has been replaced, and is named Old Barn Potting Shed. Then you've got the main farmhouse and its hall staggered from that main building. Then you've got a winter garden, which is a kind of a glazed structure. And then the inverted Y, if I can call it the inverted Y, leads to bedroom cottage, where you've got the bedroom facilities, and there's a bedroom link connecting the building to this aspect here. And then you've got dairy barn and the main living area, and an entrance link located here. And then there's a garage to the east of the dairy barn living area, which is accessed via the vehicular access, which is roughly located here, bearing in mind that this is Main Street on this plan. This is the site plan, Chairman, and I've had to split it in two, given its size. But that line there is roughly the line of the former buildings. And then you've got this inverted Y to the west and to the east, which provides that accommodation that I've just indicated. And then a garage at a lower level, which is accessed via an access here. And what's proposed and is now being built out on site is a dry stone wall along this frontage, set behind, or set in front of, should I say, a yew hedge. There is a span heritage greenhouse that's being constructed here. This will be effectively a walled garden when it's completed. And then accessed off Duck Street in this position is an access that leads into the private garden area, an allotment, private allotment for the applicant. Here you've got the garage, and then leading from the rear, you've got various domestic patio areas, etc., and footpaths leading from the rear of the building. This shows the lower area, and that's the access off Duck Street. I'll come on to some photographs in a second, but you can see there's routes of hogging paths that's proposed to be finished in terms of this garden area. And then you've got the existing hedgerow, which is intended to be retained. And set behind that, you've got a series of compost bins, a wooden shed. There's a mobile chicken structure that's located, or proposed to be located here. There's a small domestic pond that's been created. It's proposed that a mixed orchard be planted in this area here. On the east side, an outdoor shelter for the residents and a tool shed, and footpath links back into the main dwelling. So this is the structure as is built, Chairman. This is Duck Street on the left-hand side, leading downwards towards Primrose Cottage. And this is Duck Street on the corner. You can see the dry stone wall is being constructed. These photographs were taken about a month ago. And you've got the start here of that replacement building, and then the farmhouse as was, in terms of the main part of the building, looked to be staggered and set in terms of slight drop in terms of that part of the building. And then you've got the glassed area located there. And then this is the bedroom aspect, which is located to the west of the Y, of the inverted Y. So this shows Main Street. This shows the building that's been replaced. That was the old structure that I showed you on the photographs. This was the old farmhouse that has been replaced, and you can see that is from the access, and this will eventually be blocked up in terms of the dry stone wall, but it's obviously being created as the car parking area for construction of this build. This is the bedroom cottage area of that inverted Y. So this is looking back towards the heritage greenhouse that's being constructed, and there's the wall, and Duck Street leads down here, so behind this greenhouse structure, and that's a building in the adjacent to Duck Street to the west, associated with this building here. So this building forms no part of our proposal. Again, some further photographs taken from the footpath on Main Street, again showing where Duck Street and the new dry stone wall is intended to be completed. The heritage greenhouse that's will be completed if permission is granted here. And then you've got the main bedroom complex and the link connections to the main farmhouse that are proposed here, replacing those former farmhouse buildings. This is looking the other way from Main Street. So this is the main part of the building. Again, this is from the looking at the east side, where you've got the dormer window and the stepping down effect of the buildings. And you've got the main living area just located to the east on the inverted Y, which is this building here. And you can see the variety of materials in terms of timber, red tiles and slate tiles, as well as the stonework that's been built as part and parcel of the previous permission and the previous conditions. This is the hall, and you can see the garage is set at a lower level on this slope off Main Street. This access will obviously have a gated access when it's complete. So this is to the east again. This is the hall. So this is looking back at the east side of the inverted Y. So this is the main living area, and you can see the building with the more glass structure located there. And again, this shows it in its wider context. So the former buildings had a building of a similar ilk here, with a farmhouse main building being set, but obviously dropping as we went down the slope of the land. And you can see the connections between the main house and the living accommodation via the entrance halls that are proposed in terms of these links, and the garage is set at the lower level here. That just shows some further drawings, further photographs, sorry. This is Duck Street itself, so this is leading down towards the access, which is located just here on the right-hand side. I think these two photographs may well be duplicates. This is a private access that leads down to the vehicular access that will lead into the private domestic garden of the applicants. And there was initially some concern when this was being built about water runoff, etc. You can see that a drain has now been installed along there to catch water, rather than water runoff causing problems to properties to the south of Duck Street. And this is looking back up towards Duck Street. Hedges is intended to be retained, and this is the access that leads into there on the east side as we're looking up Duck Street. This shows it going into a gated access, so at least a vehicle will be able to pull off Duck Street before opening gates and then being allowed into the garden area. And this is Duck Street looking down towards Primrose Cottage, which is this property here, and you can see the relationship of Primrose Cottage to this hedge. And this is looking back from Primrose Cottage, looking back in up towards the bedroom accommodation that is built and has been built here. And this is the access of Duck Street. Again, some further photographs showing the access off Duck Street. These photographs show the slope of the driveway leading to the garage. Unfortunately, we haven't got Guy Tetley here today, but Anne Collins, I understand, does have information with regards to there being no highway objections from Guy, because we've had representations that the slope is a significant one and is likely to cause a highway safety problem on egress and or access, but Highways raised no objections to the application on that basis, Chairman. And as I said, Anne Collins may well read out what Guy Tetley has said from a highway point of view in relation to the garage at this lower level. I've put this photograph up, Chairman, just to give you a variety of different palette of materials in the village. There's been criticisms about the use of materials of the development as a whole that you and your officers have approved as part of compliance with condition applications associated with the main planning permission that was granted originally for the scheme. But I just wanted to highlight Main Street has got a number of different palettes of materials with render, stonework, brickwork, etc. So that just shows the difference of materials on the north side of Main Street. Just back to the site plan. So this shows the inverted Y. That was the main part of the building as was. These two strands have been permitted, but not in accordance with what's now before you in terms of their height increase. That's for the building names. I'll just come back to that slide again. So you've got the old barn potting shed, the main farmhouse complex with its hall, the winter garden, which was that glazed area, and then the links leading to bedroom cottage and the entrance link leading to dairy barn and the garage. Now, the next series of slides, Chairman, show the as-built situation. So this is the lower ground floor level. So that's the garage at the lower ground floor level. And you've got 2 bedrooms on that eastern wing, the winter garden and a plant room and a lift shaft. And then you've got on the west wing, which was the bedroom area, a kind of private studio with changing facilities and a store. And that was the as approved lower ground floor level. So very similar in terms of just rock and roll between the two, very similar, but slight changes. So for example, as built, you've got a couple of stores over here, whereas there was just one storage area, but bedrooms were largely the same. So the configuration was largely the same. And then this is a comparison to the as approved lower ground floor plan in relation to as was approved, which is the green area. And as you can see, as is built, which is the black area. So the whole building has been kind of just slightly tweaked about 2 degrees. And you can see the distance that has marked on there. So you've got a 2.5-ish meter distance. So it's been cranked further towards Main Street, but largely on the same kind of configuration. So that's just showing you the green as approved compared to the black as has now been built. This is the ground floor plan. So you've got the potting shed, utility, main hall, lobby lift, winter garden, kitchen, living, dining, master bedroom, and the applicant's own Tai Chi studio. And that was as approved. So again, very similar in terms of footprint and accommodation. And then again, as approved in green, as built in black. So again, you've got that slight kink, but not a drastic kink, albeit that technically it hasn't been built in accordance with the as approved plan. This is the first floor. So garden storage, a bedroom, mezzanine and a void. And again, garden storage, guest bedroom and a void. So again, rocking between those two, a very similar development as approved compared to now as built. And then again, showing the as approved drawing in green and the as built in black. So we are slightly just further across here to the west by about 850 millimeters, and slightly less here at the back. This is the as built roof plan and the as approved built roof plan. And these were the approved elevations. So this is Main Street here that shows the same configuration as this, but it's showing you with the wall here and without the wall. And you can see dairy barn to the east and bedroom cottage to the west that were built. That were approved. These were the as approved east and west elevations. So you can see this is Main Street here with the old barn, and this was the structure here, and this indicated the former dwelling farmhouse, and we permitted a slight increase in that with the winter garden and these 2 wings. And again, this is the west elevation as approved, which showed a couple of dormers set down from the roof, and I'll come on to explaining those in a second. The as approved west and south elevations. And the as approved south elevation looking directly from the south with the winter garden and the 2 wings either side. This was the as approved north and west elevation. And then these are the drawings, Chairman, that I think you need to kind of really focus on. this is where I've asked the applicant to provide comparison elevations. So this is comparison elevation 1, which shows the building as built, which is this configuration. You can see that there's an access gate that's intended to be finished off with the dry stone wall. This shows the as approved drawing in green. And then that shows you the as approved drawing on this elevation compared to the as is now built. Again, this is the elevation where you got Main Street that shows the dairy barn in its true elevation, which is here. So this is looking at this particular aspect of the scheme. And again, showing you as approved on the true elevation, and you can see there's an increase in height there from as approved. So that's the elevation that you can see, the slight difference. But of course, it's been reduced here. It's been increased in terms of that element there. This is the southeast elevation. And again, looking at this, you can see the increase in the height in terms of as built compared to as approved. And the southwest elevation. And again, showing the as approved and as built. So you can just visually see the differences. And the southwest facing elevation, again, as approved and as built. And you can see the increase in the difference in these heights compared to the as approved scheme. And again, the northwest elevation, again, showing you the height differences in relation to the roof height as approved compared to as built. This was the as approved drawing here, Chairman. This is from the east elevation, and I did indicate that these dormers as approved were to be set below the ridge of the roof, whereas the one which I think was accepted as one of the non-material amendments is now close to the ridge of that roof, and that was done in order to accommodate a lift shaft allegedly that was going in there. That's indicated on the plans that's been submitted. But this elevation you can see that shows as is built, and the drop to just bear with me a second, just go back to that previous slide, the drop down to the winter garden compared to as approved. It was a lengthier drop to the winter garden compared to what's actually being built, and that's shown in relation to that elevation. So you can see this is Main Street here. That was the building running parallel, and then you've got the dwelling coming back, and you can see the differences in the roof heights in relation to what's being built compared to what got consent. This is the Main Street access. They are intending to increase the wall, the dry stone wall, marginally in order to have a 5.3 metre wide access compared to a previous 6.53 metre access. So the access will be marginally narrower. And as I said, we've had representations about the gradient of this here, but there are no highway objections as I've previously indicated to you. This is Duck Street and the access off Duck Street. So this shows the detail in terms of Duck Street, where you've got the drain running at the back edge of the of that private trackway. That leads into this gate that's proposed here, which incorporates this gate here. And this shows this in a bit more detail. You've got this impermeable hogging road, 3 metres in length from Duck Street. You've got the French drain that's located along there. And you've got the gates that are intended to be, well, and have been implemented in terms of their location across that setback. So it enables a vehicle to come in. That's about 10 metre distance. And it enables a vehicle to come in, park, open the gates, and then go in. That's a previous slide I've just indicated. And that's that comparison one that I've just indicated, Chairman. These look to be repeats. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. I'm going backwards. I do beg your pardon. I'm hitting the wrong button. Yeah, so back to yeah, back to the access. This shows the access gate, and then within that private allotment area, Chairman, there's a whole series of ancillary structures comprising of a barbecue shelter, a field shelter, and you can see these are largely domestic shed type ancillary structures that one would find in a domestic garden situation. There's a tool and lawnmower store. There's an open wood and trailer store, again of these configurations that you can see. Compost bins that are proposed around the perimeter, a wood shed that's also proposed, and then you've got that greenhouse structure on the corner of Duck Street, and you can see the elevations of that. There's also a chicken coop that's proposed, a kind of wielded around the private garden area. It is on wheels because the applicant, I think, intends to have chickens in their rear garden as well. So there's a small chicken coop structure. Chairman, there's been much criticism and objections, for obvious reasons, of the development not being built in accordance with the approved plan. And we did investigate that to begin with and found that there wasn't sufficient evidence that there was a breach. And ultimately, obviously, what's been happening since then through non-material amendments, some approved, and then the latest set last year, we found out that the cumulative changes couldn't have been acceptable as a non-material amendment, which led to the application that you have now before you. But these are the materials that have been approved under previous applications. So we've got a natural finish with larch cladding, tongue and groove, Purbeck stone. There's criticism of that, but I'll just come back to the point that I talked about the variety of the palette of materials in Bothenhampton and in this particular stretch of Main Street. There's a reused dry stone wall, lime render's been used, slate tile. There's a standing seam zinc on the more modern part of the structure, clay tiles, steel roof, a sedum roof on part of the building. Doors and windows have been painted a particular RAL colour. Lead has been used, and black metal gutters and rainwater pipes. And in terms of the glass, we wanted the glass to be as low reflecting as we possibly could on the southern elevations, and the details of that are as set out in the report as well. So, Chairman, the thing for you to consider is not per se the planning permission of this as if it were a fresh application, because there is obviously a fallback position here on the planning permission that's been granted, and I've tried to outline to you the changes to that in terms of heights and slight tweaking of the floor plans of the building, and acknowledging those people who have objected, thinking that, well, we should be taking enforcement action here because it's not been built in accordance with the approved plan, and therefore we should refuse permission. It should all be demolished and they should all start again. That has not been considered to be an appropriate response, given the discretion to take enforcement action when there's the ability to make this Section 73A application seeking to regularise the situation over and above what's already got consent. And I acknowledge that there's a difference in relation to that, but I think you need to consider as a committee the scheme as was built compared to the scheme as is now proposed, and what we as officers are suggesting is the impacts on the character of the conservation area, the setting of listed buildings, the impact on the wider AONB and on neighbours is not significantly detrimental to warrant a further refusal of permission, particularly given the fallback position of the previous proposal. And on that basis, Chairman, I've recommended approval of the application, subject to the conditions that are listed, that it be carried out in accordance with what has been submitted and previously approved under the previous compliance with conditions. And you'll see in the report that there is a new neighbourhood plan in place for the Bridport area, which covers Bothenhampton. And I think this might be one of the first applications that's come to committee where, as a result of the neighbourhood plan being made, I've actually outlined the neighbourhood policies that I think are relevant in full, and then tried to answer the appropriateness of the acceptability of the scheme in relation to them as part and parcel of the report. And finally, we did have a request that, given COVID-19, the hours of construction be extended to, I think it was 9 o'clock, in line with government guidance. But you'll see from my report, Chairman, that I've concluded that, given the proximity of residents, on the one hand, if people work longer hours, they'll get the scheme finished quicker, but that needs to be balanced against the need to safeguard neighbours' amenity. And you'll see what I've suggested in terms of hours of construction. The approved one was till 5 o'clock, I think, and we're now suggesting that that gets extended until 6 o'clock. So on that basis, Chairman, the application is recommended for approval, as I said, given the fallback position of what was approved and the differences that are now planned as part and parcel of the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. We will now hear from members of the public. The first 3 letters of objection or otherwise that have been received before hearing from the agent.
Simon Brodie objects. Firstly, thank you for allowing me to speak. I object to this application. The original planning application in 2018 contained photo montages as an aid to interpreting the formal drawings, which showed the existing buildings being rebuilt with additional wings downslope, which were barely visible. Quite reasonably, this was granted permission. What was built, and which this current application purports to show, is completely different. Buildings have not been rebuilt as before. The wings are 1.3 metres higher, are up to 3 metres closer to the road, and materials used are alien to the Bothamhampton Conservation Area. I carried out some rough surveys of the as-built structure and established the extent of the non-compliance. Having worked with your officers in the past, planners, conservationists, building control, engineers, highways, public servants all, I felt very strongly that I would do all I could to make them aware of what appeared to be a flagrant breach of the original permission. I engaged 4 consultants who proved the point, and they, very honourably, have produced damning reports which are included in my written submission. These reports were made available to your officers, and it would be presumptuous to assume they had any great influence. But in October 2019, your officers concluded that the project as built did not enjoy the benefit of planning permission, and as a consequence, any previously granted NMAs were invalid. A retrospective application would be required. Does this current application have the same features as those shown in the original application, in particular the photo montages? No, it does not. The pre-existing buildings have not been replicated. The wings are highly visible. The garage drive is dangerous. The materials of construction have no place in this conservation area, to name but a few transgressions. A number of listed properties in Main Street are now compromised, as indeed is your council's own conservation report. Had this application been presented in 2018, it would have been rejected out of hand. To grant permission now would be to endorse a witting breach of the original planning permission. I recommend that this committee rejects the current application. Graham Stiles objects. I object to the above application. The building is completely out of scale and sympathy with its surroundings and has greatly damaged the centre of an historic village. I welcome the committee's scrutiny of this case and appreciate the chance to comment. This extremely large development is surrounded by listed buildings and is in a conservation area in an area of outstanding natural beauty. In the original design and access statement on which planning approval in April 2018 was based, certain assurances were made. For example, that the building would respect the conservation area and would not impact existing views, that existing building materials would be reused, and even that apple trees would be carefully relocated. None of the assurances were respected. Our conservation area has been damaged by the sheer size and scale of the building. The materials used jar with the surroundings. Hardly a single stone appears to have been reused. And as for the poor apple trees, it seems that they were relocated to the great orchard in the sky a long time ago. Why give these assurances in the first place, I wonder? Of even more concern is the fact, established through the persistence and money of local residents, that the building is substantially higher and closer to the road than it should be, and thus all the more overbearing in relation to its surroundings. It's striking that even casual visitors to the village genuinely believe the building is a hotel. Any applications for alterations to listed buildings in the vicinity of Homestead Farm is rightly scrutinised and rejected if it doesn't comply with the regulations. It would be wholly inconsistent and unfair, therefore, to permit such glaring departures from the agreed scheme in this case, given the damage caused to the area. To do so would also be inconsistent with the relevant local plans, given the weight these attach to enhancing and preserving the local environment. I very much hope, therefore, that the committee will reject the application. Sarah Butcher objects. I'm writing to express my objections to the development at Homestead Farm before the coming planning meeting on August the 13th. You will be aware that there is strong feeling against this development. I wish to stress that this is not simply a reflection of retrograde NIMBYism. This is a hugely substantial and dominant site in the centre of an historic village. Any building constructed risked altering the character of its surroundings. Had the building been constructed in adherence with the plans, this building would have been sympathetic and the impact mitigated. Instead, the building is far more intrusive than planners condoned and is to the considerable detriment of historic Bothenhampton. When taking the many infringements into account, including, most significantly, buildings well over 1 metre higher than planned and 3 metres closer to the road than permitted, councillors should know that this is not an ordinary development. This is no average residential building for family occupation. It is a £4 million development, according to the website of Hart Design and Construction, which constructed the building, on a 5,000 square metre site. It is a hugely significant development for Bridport, let alone Bothenhampton. Given its pivotal village centre location, it should have been constructed as sensitively as possible. Instead, we have a situation where the historic centre of a village, changed very little for hundreds of years, has suddenly been altered overnight by a construction resembling a municipal leisure centre. It's not just residents who object. Visitors to the village are aghast and stop to gape. The excessive height of the construction, combined with its proximity to the road, both of which contravene stipulations made in the original planning permission to ensure the building blended into its surroundings, have made this building substantially different to that originally envisaged by the council. The architects and the owners were made aware of villagers' realisation that the construction of Homestead Farm contravened the plans as early as February 2019. So too was Dorset Council's planning enforcement team. However, villagers' complaints were initially dismissed by all three parties, and it was only after the village employed its own team of architects and planning consultants at some expense that the architects finally concluded that the building did not adhere to the plans. Having finally made this admission, the subsequent argument of the architects and owners has been that the changes are so negligible as to be immaterial. This is absolutely not the case. With a building of this size, in a location of this sensitivity, the changes have entirely altered the landscape and will damage Bothenhampton in perpetuity unless rectified. Bothenhampton and Walditch Parish Council object. Bothenhampton and Walditch Parish Council objects strongly to this current development. The original agreed plans have not been respected. On the contrary, there have been very significant divergences. Independent surveys commissioned by local residents have shown that the building is over 1 metre too high and that the two wings are up to 3 metres closer to Main Street than they should be, and thus all the more intrusive. Nor is the building composed of local materials. In every respect, therefore, it is overbearing and unsympathetic in relation to the surrounding buildings and its setting. The sensitive location of this exceptionally large development in a conservation area surrounded by listed buildings would demand stringent compliance with the agreed original planning application. Unfortunately, this has not happened. The development has not only damaged the centre of an historic village to the consternation of many local residents, but is also surely contrary to the relevant provisions of local plans and the importance these attach to conserving and enhancing the local environment. The Parish Council therefore trusts the committee will reject the current application.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you for stepping in today, and thank you for reading those. Do we now have Councillor Dave Bolwell? David?
Chairman, has the applicant or the agent not got some comments to make as well?
The order of speakers I have in front of me is Simon Brodie, Graham Stiles, Sarah Butcher, Bothenhampton and Walditch Parish Council, then David Bolwell, then Andy Partridge.
I do beg your pardon, Chairman.
That's the order I've been given.
I do beg your pardon.
Okay, thank you. David Bolwell? Do we have Councillor David Bolwell?
Hello, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh,
Bolwell.
technology. Yes, thank you. It's Councillor David Bolwell. I'm the ward member for Bothenhampton. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'd like about an hour instead of 3 minutes, but I'll try and be quick on this one. I just want to point out before we go too far the definition of special interest of the conservation area for Bothenhampton. Strong local building traditions employing forest marble stone. The green spaces along the stream below Main Street and hill slopes west and east of Duck Street, particularly below Homestead Farmhouse, are all of great importance to the setting of the village. So moving on, this application is before you as there have been many changes to the original approval given by West Dorset District Council. The question if the original approval should have been given is purely academic. But one important point to note is that the original proposed building was refused by the then conservation officer due to its mass and size. And after discussion at after the pre-planning, they were finally accepted when they were reduced in size. So this building was not even built to those approved plans. Changes to materials, position and size of the building have become apparent and were originally submitted piecemeal to the planning department. But the important ones of mass, height and position were initially ignored, finally looked at by enforcement and found to be okay. So the residents of Bothenhampton had to pay for an independent survey, which you've already heard about, the results of which clearly show what had been contested all along, that the heights were wrong and so was the positioning. And I think you've seen that, possibly not quite as well explained as the chart I have in front of me. I'd just like to draw attention to the officer's report 6.17. The heights that he has there on his chart are totally different to the ones that were submitted when the NMAs were put in. So obviously, for some reason, they've mysteriously got smaller. I wonder why that was. Once the applicant had accepted these height changes, their surveyor came to the same conclusions, by the way. They then submitted a group of NMAs. As we know, they were thrown out. They included previously conceded changes in materials, windows, absence of roof lights, photovoltaic cells, and external staircase. They've also removed a good 10 metres of what was listed on the conservation plan as an historic hedgerow, which runs down the side of Duck Street. Nobody seems to have noticed this one. It's gone 10 metres instead of 5, and it was historic. The building continued regardless, even though technically they no longer had approval. This is a material consideration that does not favour the applicant. In this new application, the heights shown in their surveyor's report have been reduced, and such misinformation seems to run through their previously approved plan and the subsequent NMA requests. Now, I've just heard that the fallback position is that the original application had approval. I submit that that may be the case, but it was not built to the original application. You must bear that in mind when you consider this one. I think Bothenhampton residents and Parish Council have lost faith in the very planning system that's supposed to protect their historic village. This extremely large building built of non-local materials in the wrong place, too high and too massive, does not in any way enhance or improve the conservation area. It's a shame the current conservation officer did not feel it necessary to visit the site before making their report. The report says minor changes to an already approved application. I find that very sad personally. I put it to you that this site has been littered with issues of non-compliance to the original approval, and this new application seeks approval of this continual non-compliance. I ask that permission is refused in terms of mass, height, positioning and materials, and applicable policies, local plan ENV 12, design and positioning, ENV 16, amenity, and the Bridport neighbourhood plan D1 and D8. I also put forward that it's purely subjective if you look at the officer's report on paragraph 17.37 and 17.38. And also 17.41, the ownership of Duck Street is not relevant, but the fact that the hedgerow is listed on the conservation plan is relevant, and that's been ripped out to the tune of 10 metres instead of 5. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Bolwell. Alison Sharp will now read out the submission by the applicant stroke agent, which is actually Andy Partridge, the agent. Thank you, Alison.
Andy Partridge, agent, supports. As this application was made under section 73, the original planning permission remains unaffected by today's decision. The original planning permission and approved alterations is the baseline by which to assess the proposal. It is essentially the fallback position. The as-approved dwelling is a substantial, complex house consisting of multiple and angled facades of differing heights, set in a large plot. The changes to the design should be considered in this planning context. The modifications, including increases and decreases in the dimensions of the elements making up the building, and the change to the angle of the southwest wing, are slight. This is confirmed by your conservation officer, who has stated that the changes are minor in nature. There is also some local support for the changes. Looking at the design changes, no two views are the same. Views across the valley were partly contained pre-development. The as-built scheme also contains views across the valley. Thus, the changes to the heights of winter garden, dairy barn and bedroom cottage elements do not make any appreciable difference, while the shortening of dairy barn, bedroom cottage and the farmhouse compensates for any small loss of view above the buildings. When viewed from the far side of the valley, changes are imperceptible. Also, the cranking of the southwest wing by 2 degrees is unnoticeable. The evidence from the experts is clear. In considering the impact on the conservation area and listed buildings, and by extension the AONB, there have been no adverse comments from Historic England, Natural England, Highways to any element of the scheme, or the Conservation Officer. The officer's report identifies no impact on neighbours' amenity in terms of overlooking and loss of privacy, particularly bearing in mind that the dwelling is sited centrally in its plot and the very large gaps between the properties that border it. By relocating the entrance of Duck Street by 175 centimetres south, it avoids utility services and is again a minor change. The improvement to the ecological credentials of this low carbon house, now including a pond, will improve biodiversity and is endorsed by policy of the Dorset Natural Environment team. If in the event committee are minded to refuse the application, we would request a COVID-secure site visit. We ask you to follow the expert evidence and approve this application. That's all, Chairman.
Thank you, Alison. And thank you for your work today. Very much appreciated. I do have people wishing to speak, commencing with Councillor Nick Ireland. Hello, good afternoon, Nick.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I continue, can I just ask the officer to confirm what we're actually discussing here? Because I'm slightly now confused about what's up for discussion and what we can decide on. So on item 6.14 on page 87, he lists essentially 5 things, which are the pond, angle of house, length of width, Duck Street and height. So can you confirm that that's basically what we're looking at, and things like the NMAs, which have already been approved, are still out there and they still exist, and whatever we do today won't get changed? And then once he's done that, can I come back, please?
Mr. Rogers, do you have a response?
Sorry, I was just muted then. Yeah, you're looking at the scheme as a whole, Chairman. That's what you're being asked to consider. And I'm just flicking through the. So here's the typical elevation is the building as a whole in terms of the drawings that have been submitted is what committee are being asked to consider, which is a variation of all the plans list that were associated with the previous permission.
Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Sorry, Chair, didn't Councillor Ireland want to come back with a question?
I'd like to come back, please. Sorry.
Okay, you come back.
So I went to the site yesterday, late evening, about 6 o'clock last night. I've never been to that village before, so I don't know what it looked like beforehand. And obviously the building is basically built now. From what I could see, everything seems to be intact pretty much. So going through the sort of list of things I saw last night, and I was working on the list of 5 things that are in the report. I don't really have any comment on the landscaping. It seems okay to me. The angle changes seem to be trivial in terms of 2 degrees. Who can measure that really? Length and width don't seem to have changed very much. I did look at Duck Street. I know Councillor Baldwell had already primed me to say if I go to have a look down Duck Street, that the entrance is completed. Some of the hedge is gone, I guess, but obviously some of it had to go. Some of it seems to have gone just a bit further down for the entrance, but the relocation of the entrance seemed to make sense. And so it all comes to me. It all seems to come down to the height, and I'd like an explanation why there's a huge difference, a discrepancy between the numbers in the report, the numbers in that the applicant have submitted, which don't match the numbers in the report, the numbers which the local residents have produced, which is over 1 metre high, 1.3 metres I think is the number. But I guess if you physically move the wings further up the slope, okay, that actually, because of the angle of the slope, will actually increase the height quite substantially. So if they were further down, they would therefore obviously be lower, even if they're built the same height. So there seems to be a huge discrepancy in the height as built, but realistically, are we going to turn around and say you're going to knock it all down? I don't know. But it seems to be fighting a battle that's already lost, to be honest. It was approved years ago, and that building is here to stay in some sort of form. But I'd like some sort of detailed explanation of why there's a discrepancy in the heights, and possibly maybe a steer for Mr. Crowther. Like, if we do refuse this on because it's not to plan, which it doesn't seem to be to plan, it's going to go to appeal, guaranteed. It's a huge house with a lot of money invested in. It's going to go to appeal. What are the chances of that our decision being upheld if that happens as well? It doesn't seem likely that an inspector would turn it down, to me anyway. That's my comments, please.
Chairman, as case officer, if I might start and then pass over to Mr. Crowther.
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, just on the on Councillor Ireland's issue about the discrepancy of heights. I mean, the information and the tables that you've got in your report are provided by the applicant. 6.18 does say that the height of the development has been surveyed by the applicant, cross-referenced against the approved slab level, 23.45 above sea level, issued on the approved drainage drawing to give a true height of the development as built, and to provide as accurate a height as possible of the approved development, bearing in mind that the plans were hand-drawn, which inevitably produced inaccuracies and variations in the heights of the elevations, and that there were no datum heights given on the approved drawing, nor were these required by condition. The approved height was therefore relative, the difference between the ground level and the ridge height, rather than being absolute. That said, para 619, it says the degree of accuracy in height between the approved development and as built is not critical, because it's the development as built which is being considered in the general context of its setting and the approved development. And I think it's on that basis, if I can just go back to the presentation, which is it's these drawings that you see, and there's one example of the building as approved outlined in green compared to as has been built, which is the thing for you to focus on in terms of the change in the height. And one other example being, if I just get back to the layout and the swing, for example, this was the ground floor plan, and this is where you've got that swing where green is indicated as approved, and then the black is as it's been built. So there's the line of as approved, and then it's tweaked by, as I said, by these 2 degrees that incorporates this. And I think Councillor Ireland is right that I would say that as the case officer recommending approval is that yes, we agree that this building has not been built in accordance with the original permission. What's being asked now is can we have permission for the building as is built? And the building as is built, bearing in mind the building that got permission, given these changes, we don't feel as officers are significant and demonstrably harmful enough to recommend refusal of the application, bearing in mind what Councillor Ireland says about the possibility of an appeal and the outcome of that. But who knows? But hence the recommendation for approval.
Can I, it's Councillor Ireland again, can I just comment on, so if you leave that picture up, so that the wing that's on the left-hand side, so it's the slope is from the top of the down to the bottom. If you've been to the site, so
Main Street is there.
So if that's a slope going vertically down that picture, so if you're saying the height, so if you look at the height of that particular wing, by virtue of you moving it, was it 2.3 something meters forward effectively, or some slightly less because it's a slight angle, just by physically moving that will increase the height. So not only you're saying the heights are relative, but it's actually the absolute height is changing completely, because maybe the building is only slightly fractionally higher than it was planned, but by moving it further up the slope, you're actually increasing the height in relation to the surrounding buildings by a substantial amount. That was my point.
Yeah, and just on that, around that point, I'm just going to try and get the elevation that shows that particular thing that you're talking about, which is that there. So this is that building that you're talking about here, and so that's why you got the increase in height, because of that tweak having come round.
Right, we'll now hear from Mr. Crowther if we can, before hearing from Councillor Kelvin Clayton and then Councillor Kate Weller.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Phil Crowther. I'd really just build on what Mr. Rogers said, is that members need to consider the as-built the as-built building, which is the proposal before you, and that you shouldn't be making a decision based on whether the difference in height between what's been proposed and what's been built is too much or too little. You should be making a decision on whether the building as built is too high, which has a planning impact which is unacceptable. So is it unacceptable as built in planning reasons, and not simply because it's increased in height? So you'd have to have reasons why the height of the building as built is unacceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On page 3 of the original design and access statement, it says it does not impact the views still visible over the building ridgeline and further softened by a significant amount of green roofing. Riding over the fact I can't see any green roofing, I went back to the photo montages in the original application, which the first objector referred to, and they did show the wings to be downslope and barely visible. I visited the site on Sunday afternoon and stood in the exact spot the photo montages were created from. To me, the difference in height is significant, and certainly the views from that position have just about been obliterated. So to that extent, and the fact that it's within a conservation area, it seems to be going against a number of material considerations. Two sort of things I'm also concerned about. In Darren's report, point 618, as Councillor Nick Ireland's already referred to, the survey was done by the applicant. Have we got independent verification? Because I'm concerned about the disparity between the report from the consultants hired by the residents and the evidence we're seeing. So that's one question, the difference between those two reports. And Councillor Ireland also mentioned the fact that, well, I was going to ask on 14.4, has the conservation officer been to the site? And if he hasn't, how can he fully comment? And lastly, 14.5, perhaps somebody can just, perhaps my suspicious mind, but Historic England does not wish to offer any comments. That seems a very strange wording. Is that normal?
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. I think we'll now hear from Mr. Rogers again, and also Mr. Criver if he wants to make any further comments at this stage. So, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, Chairman, Historic England's representation is available online. That's exactly what they do say. We don't wish to offer any comments, having considered the merits or otherwise of the application. As regards the Conservation Officer, I don't know whether the Conservation Officer has visited the site, because what they tend to do is they get a list of planning applications which they read themselves, and if they feel that this scheme is a minor alteration to an approved scheme, having read the detailed comments, then they make their comments accordingly. But of course, just because the Conservation Officer hasn't been to the site, I am the case officer and I have. And even if the Conservation Officer have recommended some concerns, I, as the case officer, have to pull all of the material considerations together, and I have to balance all of those material considerations and come out with a conclusion. So just because the Conservation Officer says object doesn't mean to say that the case officer would follow in that particular lead, because there will be other considerations to take on board. In relation to the first question, the answer is that we have relied on the applicant in terms of their height details. We haven't got any independent. We've got third parties who've submitted their details indicating that there's discrepancies. But I come back to the point, which is this. You need to look at the building as has been built in terms of the drawings that I've presented to you today, because they are as accurate as we can possibly get them, with me having had a meeting with the applicant's architect to get them to explain the differences in those heights. I also come back to what Nick Ireland says, Councillor Nick Ireland, which is if you look at those tweaks overall, and as Mr. Crowther said, what resulting planning harm arises if members feel that it is too dominating and too overbearing in relation to the character of the area, and as an effect on neighbour amenity, then that's a committee decision which we can work up some words for you.
This is very interesting. We will now hear from Councillor Kate Weller.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm actually incensed by this application. I think Grand Designs has a lot to answer for, doesn't it? I like this building. I think it's terrific, and in any other location, I'd be clapping my hands and saying this is sort of buildings that I find exciting. However, I don't find it exciting in this location in the middle of a conservation area. But the reason that I'm incensed is the derisory language that we've got right the way through here. The agent doesn't make any appreciable difference. It's 1.3 meters higher in one point than it should be. That is, in my terms, I'm 4'11". That 1.3 meters is 4'3". That's almost my entire height higher. I think that's appreciable, and the people in the village think it's appreciable. And 3 meters closer to the front, that's nearly 10 foot. That's the size of a lot of people's rooms. So these are appreciable amounts. How can something get built of those sort of proportions without anyone noticing? And that's what's really annoying me, that we've got this building to almost completion because they've continued with the building when they knew that it wasn't an inch here, an inch there. These were significant differences. And then to suggest that it's because they were hand drawn. This is a £4 million project. Are you telling me they didn't know what they were doing, that they didn't have accurate drawings? Because that is really rather insulting. It's a total disregard and and a lack of respect for the planning process. If this building had been built on the sight line that it was supposed to be built, then those heights would have been within the recommended, within the planning permission. It's because there's been a total disregard, and I just find it quite extraordinary. I think one of the objectors said it's a witting breach of the original planning permission, and I believe that is the case. This hasn't happened accidentally, because these sorts of projects don't happen accidentally, in my view. So it's just a lack of respect for our planning process, for our conservation area, taking out a historic hedge, albeit only a small amount. Those are significant things. I understand exactly what Mr. Crowther and Mr. Rogers have said about we're looking at what is now built, and I get that. However, we should be doing something about how builders and applicants carry on and do just as they please with a total disregard for the planning process. It shows such a lack of consent, of respect, and I wonder why we bother sitting and making suggestions if what we say can be roughshod over whenever they feel like it. I'm appalled. I'm absolutely appalled. Thank you.
Councillor Weller, rest assured that we as committee members always appreciate what you have to say in respect of all applications, large or small. Now, Mr. Rogers, you've heard quite a bit long commentary from Councillor Weller about these variations that have been explained to you, and you're happy to accept that these variations are somewhat small. Do you have anything to add at this point before I move on and ask Councillor Jean Dunsey for her comments, and then that will be followed by Councillor David Shortell? Mr. Rogers, anything to add?
No, Chairman, you have my report before you.
OK, we will now hear from Councillor Jean Dunsey. Hello, good afternoon, Jean.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you. I too, following on from what Councillor Weller has said, I agree with what she said. We've been told that some of these plans have been hand-drawn, and then when the building was built, it wasn't built to where the permissions were given. I mean, I'm wondering, was it drawn on the back of a fag packet? Because that's what it looks like to me. The permissions given have been ridden roughshod over. They appear to me to have built it broadly in line with the thrust of the plans, but certainly not according to the plans. I'm very concerned about the height of the roofs on the wings, both wings, because firstly, the farmhouse and the other the wings have been made shorter, and that's pushed the roofs higher because they've been moved closer to Main Street. So therefore, they have become seemingly higher than looking from the road or the high pavement. And secondly, the roofs have increased. And I was reading something that said about reasons for the higher roof wings, and the architect said we had to run the services above the steels. That is presumably the services that the house needs, and the steels were for the roof. To lower the steels would have meant that the extended doors and roof overhangs to the southern elevations would be too low. So we had to keep the steels at their current levels. Now this is a big development. It's expensive. It's a big house, and it's expensive. And knowing how sensitive this house is in this environment, in this village, the roof lines should have been kept to the correct heights. it's not good enough to say, well, you know, we didn't think about this, we didn't think about that, therefore we've had to raise them to fit it all in. That's a technical issue which should have been ironed out before the planning permission was even asked for. It's all a bit sloppy, and it gives disregard to the planning committee and the council. And I'm angry too, and I don't like this, and I don't feel we should be treated, and the residents of Bottonhampton should be treated in this way and lose their view when they were promised a view. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Jean Dunseith. I do have people queuing up to speak. However, I'd like to hear from officers. I'd like to hear in a second from Philip Crowther and Anne Collins. Then we will hear from David Shortell and Kelvin Clayton again. So we'll just hear from officers Philip Crowther and Anne Collins.
Thank you, Chairman. It's Phil Crowther. I completely understand why members feel that a development proceeding like this shows disrespect to the planning system and to the committee. What I do need to point out, though, is that those are not reasons to refuse an application, and the fact that the legislation expressly allows applications for retrospective planning permission, i.e. development that's been carried out without first getting planning permission. The fact that you can apply for retrospective planning permission shows that is a scenario which the legislators envisaged and thought was an appropriate way to deal with this, well, similar developments. And I'd also just reiterate that if you're following Councillor Ireland's summary, if your main concern is about the roof heights, your decision needs to be based on the proposal as before you and whether the heights are acceptable or whether they are not acceptable. And if they're not acceptable, you need to have planning reasons other than simply that they've increased in height. Thank you, Chairman.
Is everybody happy with what Mr. Crowther said there? Because he did break up slightly. Members?
Yeah, I'm happy, Chair.
Yes, I heard it, Chair.
Happy, thank you, Chair.
We'll now hear from Anne Collins.
Thank you, Chairman. I was really just going to reiterate actually what Phil's already kind of said, that really, you know, members can look to refuse this application, but not because they've not built it in accordance with the plan. It needs to be for material planning consideration, and members need to identify what harm, if they think harm is caused by the height of the building, what harm that actually is, and then obviously officers could come up with some wording if appropriate to do so.
Yeah, Chairman, Darren Rogers again. As I've been listening to what Councillor Bolwell said, so I've been making some notes with regards to his potential reason for refusal. So if that did come to pass, obviously we can have an adjournment and come up with a reason for you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. But as I say, we do have a lot of right. So we will now hear from Councillor David Shortell.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I agree with Councillor Keller and Councillor Dunseith. I think over the years, when I've been undergoing some planning meetings, there has a term come up during those meetings about planning by stealth, and that this perhaps has an element of that. But treating it on its current proposal, in other words, the application as built, I think the height of the building does form an inconvenience for neighbours, and so perhaps, you know, we can perhaps look on design and materials, or layout and density as material consideration, on mass, height etc. And I was just wondering, you know, whether that could be an approach. Back to you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Shortell. Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the officer's report 16.1, it says the two main issues are the impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, AONB, and the impact on amenity of neighbours, in which case I would like to propose rejection of this application, citing a number of sources. Neighbourhood Plan HT2, proposals that have a negative impact or harm the qualities of the public realm as identified in the neighbourhood characteristics of this plan will not be supported. Local plan ENV 10.1, all development proposals should contribute positively to the maintenance and enhancement of the local identity and distinctiveness. Development should be informed by the character of the site and surroundings. And lastly, NPPF 127C, that planning policies and decisions should ensure that developments are sympathetic to the local character and history, including the surrounding built environment and landscape setting.
Right. Do we have any comments from Councillor Williams? Any comments from Councillor Williams?
Yeah. Hello. I sort of concur with Kelvin on this one. I feel that the heights have affected the conservation area and the residential amenity of residents. I have went up again at the weekend to have a look at how it's changed again. I've sort of seen this building go up and how it there have been lots of complaints. Could Darren show us the slide of the winter garden and the change in height of that as well, please?
Just bear with me a second, Chairman.
You've gone past it.
Yeah, I'm trying to just get a better.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one that shows the winter garden there as built. As you can see, there was a drop, a bigger drop on the as approved drawing.
Yeah.
You can see there. So yeah, the winter garden is bigger, and you know, I take on board what Councillor Clayton and Bolwell have said in terms of impact on the conservation area and the amenity of neighbours, and that's something, if members were to agree to that we can adjourn and come up with some words for members.
Because in my mind, that just the flow of the perpendicular to the
yeah, I think what you're trying to say, Councillor Williams, is that drop and that drop and then that drop is not as great as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's actually what I'm saying, and I think also the sort of the repositioning of the trying to get the bearings right. Southwest wing has caused quite considerable difference, particularly in the height and the sort of closeness to the houses on Main Street. So I concur with Councillor Clayton's summing up of it, but I think somebody else has already beaten me to seconding.
Okay, Mr. Rogers, do you mind if we just go through the photographs in the presentation, and I'll make some comments, starting from the beginning. Right. Okay, let's just talk through this. Bovenhampton is a village or a conservation area, and it has great character and charm. And I think this is going to be compromised with a building where there are issues re design and positioning, and also the mass of the building as constructed. Can we move on? Continue to the existing buildings. We're looking at existing buildings within the village. Go back. There, you see, this building is going to be, as in the course of construction, is of such contrast with the street scene within the conservation area. Do continue. Stop. Go back. Go back one. That is the village hall. This is very much a public building there on the right with a notice board. That is the village hall. You are in the heart of the conservation area, and you are looking out on this new building as constructed. And I think it's a helpful exercise to go through this. If you look at that picture here on the right, and you talk about community buildings within a conservation area, on the right hand side of Bovenhampton, as you head towards Bridport, that was the site of a major public building called a pub. And you can see that any change in roof level, and we've heard Kate Weller's comments about that increase in the roof line from the approved, is quite noticeable within the confines of the conservation area. Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, can I suggest that we come up with a form of words for members, perhaps?
Yes, that is what we will do, because we have Councillor Clayton proposing refusal, and we have a seconder in the form of Councillor Kate Weller. So we will adjourn. Will you need 10 minutes, Mr.
10 minutes, please. Yeah, please, 10 minutes.
So we will reconvene at 15:42, or should we say, we'll say 4:45, 15:45.
Thank you.
Is everyone happy with that? Thank you. Okay, Anne?
Yes, Chair, I have some wording here that I could share if members would like me to.
Yes.
Are we still adjourned?
We are still adjourned.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so it is approximately 15:45 and we'll hear now from Anne Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I have some wording if you'd like me to share my screen so that members can see the 2 reasons for refusal we've drafted.
Thank you.
So the first one, can everyone see that clearly? Is that zoomed in enough for members? So the first reason for refusal is the proposal is a visually dominating and prominent built form of development out of character to the area. The site is located within the conservation area and where the wider setting of that area is affected, such that the proposal does not preserve or enhance that area as is required and set out given the statutory Section 72 test of the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservations Area Act 1990. On that basis, it has an adverse impact on the existing conservation area character and harms the conservation area character and appearance. That harm would be less than substantial, but there are no wider public benefits arising from the proposal that would outweigh that harm in the planning balance. As such, the proposal will not be in accordance with policies ENV4, ENV10 or ENV12 of the West Dorset, Weymouth and Portland Local Plan 2015, policies HT2, D1 and D8 of the Bridport Neighbourhood Plan, nor paragraph 127 and section 16 of the National Planning Policy Framework 2019, and in particular paragraph 192, which states, in determining planning applications, local planning authorities should take account of the desirability of new development making a positive contribution to local character and distinctiveness. The second draft reason for refusal, Chair. The proposed development, by reason of its mass, scale and bulk, has an unduly dominating and overbearing impact when viewed from existing neighbouring properties in Main Street and Duck Street. As a result, it sits uncomfortably in relation to those neighbouring occupiers and is detrimental to their amenity outlook. Its mass, scale and bulk is also detrimental to the character and appearance of the area. As such, the proposed development will be contrary to policies ENV10, ENV12 and ENV16 of the Weymouth and Portland and West Dorset Local Plan 2015, policies DA1 and D8 of the Bridport Neighbourhood Plan and section 12 of the National Planning Policy Framework 2019, and in particular paragraph 127, which states, amongst other things, that decisions should ensure that developments provide a high standard of amenity for existing and future users. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Councillor Clayton, are you happy with that wording?
Yes, Chair, more than happy with that. Thank you to the officers for doing that.
Do you want to add anything? Because I know we're conscious of what this looks from the main street and also Duck Street as you're going past that interesting building on the right, etc., where we have this new large entrance. Do you want to add anything, or indeed?
I'm happy with the wording as suggested, Chair.
Okay, you are happy. Councillor Kate Weller, are you happy?
Yes, I'm happy, Chairman. Thank you.
Right. So we have a proposer and a seconder for refusal. So we will go through the list of members. For the formality, Kelvin Clayton.
Yeah, refuse, Chair.
Sue Cocking.
Refuse, Chair.
Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Refuse, Chair.
Councillor Nick Ireland.
Refuse, Chair.
Councillor David Shortell.
Thank you, Chair. I support refusal.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I support refusal.
Councillor Kate Weller.
Refuse.
And I also are for refuse. So this application has been refused. Thank you, members. We will now move on to the next application, which takes us down to Charmouth. Item FWDD 2000253, Beach Chalet adjacent car park, Charmouth Beach, Lower Sea Lane, Charmouth, and we have a case officer who's going to present this item to us.
Thank you, Chairman. Are you seeing?
Okay, you're there.
Hello. Are you seeing my? Are you seeing my screen?
I'm seeing you, and I see Beach Chalet on the screen.
I'm just trying to work out which button it is that actually moves the screen. Okay, yeah, fine. Right, this is a variation of condition, section 73. I'm just putting this slide up to show you where the building is in relation to the beach car park, Lower Sea Lane, and the beach is down towards there to the southeast. The building is already there. It was converted from the public toilets to a chalet in 2002, and all the works were approved as part of that application. So this slide is just showing you that what it used to be like before, when it was the toilets, and now it's been converted to a chalet with a small shower room and WC, and it's got some external windows and doors put in. So when it was converted from the toilets to the beach chalet in 2002, it was conditioned that the chalet should not be used as a dwelling or overnight holiday accommodation, or for ancillary sales or serving of food or drink. And that condition said the development hereby approved shall not be used as either a dwelling, overnight holiday accommodation for food or drink, and the reason given that it would be detrimental to the character of the area, and a dwelling would be contrary to the development plan. So that was daytime chalet use only. Subsequently, in 2013, a further permission was granted to amend the condition so that they could use it. They wanted to use it for occasional overnight holiday accommodation. We felt that was acceptable at the time, and we allowed it to be used for overnight holiday accommodation for occasional use, with the condition that it was for a maximum of 2 weeks at any one time, to be used by the owner and their family and friends, and that they kept a record of overnight use. And that condition is one that's in place at the moment. Now the applicants have come forward again, and they're wanting to vary the wording of that condition again to relax it a little bit more, and they wanted the wording to allow holiday accommodation only and not to be used as permanent unrestricted residential accommodation. Now we feel that the wording of that condition would be not robust enough, and therefore we've said it would be acceptable, but with the wording on the recommendation, which is that it chalet hereby approved shall not be used as a permanent dwelling, nor for ancillary sales or serving of food or drink. Overnight holiday accommodation shall only take place between the 1st of March and the 31st of October each year, and the owners have to keep a record of the overnight use. And the reason we're considering that is acceptable is, again, we don't want it to be a permanent dwelling, and given that it's in a coastal erosion zone and land instability zone, we don't want a permanent dwelling, and it's outside the development boundary. But we consider that controlling it between the 1st and the 31st of March is robust enough. So that is now the recommendation, that we vary the wording of the condition from the one that was approved in 2013, which was for 2 weeks, for between the 1st and the 31st of March. Okay, right. I have got a update that only arrived after the report was written, and I'm obliged to read that out to you. This has come from an Anthony Farmer. He says there's a shortage of toilet facilities in Charmouth. As a result of COVID-19, the beach area has been more congested than usual for this time of the year. Unless you want people relieving themselves on the beach or in the sea, more facilities need to be provided. I therefore recommend the toilet block is returned to its original use. However, I've requested a copy of the Evans conveyance plan of the land given to the parish council, but have yet to receive it. I therefore ask that the planning committee check that the toilet block was not built on any of the Evanses' land. If it was, then it is in breach of the terms of the gift and should be removed, and the site restored to the condition it was in when the land was given to the parish council. Well, that was before my time in the whenever the land was transferred, and also I think because the way we advertise the wording of the variation condition is this person thinks that it's the change of use of the toilets to the beach chalet, but it isn't, because that already happened in 2013. So the first part of that isn't relevant to this application. And also, in terms of the ownership, I checked on the certificate that was submitted with the application for this variation of condition, and the applicant has signed certificate A, which says nobody except the applicant had any involvement in the land. And that applicant, I don't know who she is, she's a lady called Jane Lister from Abingdon, but she signed that certificate, and for the purposes of this planning application that is sufficient. That's all we need to validate the planning application. But I say that objection came in as a late rep, so I was obliged to read it to you. So the recommendation is to change the wording of variation 1 from the 2013 permission to as it is on the screen in front of you now. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Joe. I understand that we've had a submission from Charmouth Parish Council. Alison, would you like to read comments of Charmouth Parish Council?
Charmouth Parish Council object. The Parish Council objects to this application as it is felt that the original approval in 2013 is adequate and it would not want to see the conditions relaxed any further. That's all, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, who would like to begin with comments? Do we have any comments? Sarah Williams. Councillor Sarah Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my only comment is obviously with this loosening of a condition, this will now be able to be let as a commercial holiday let, because we've taken out friends, family. Obviously, it could be let to friends and family, but this could turn it into much more of a sort of potential Airbnb, etc. Are there any? And there was a condition on that it could only be used for 2 weeks at any one time. Is that still valid, or could it be let on a longer let?
If I can answer, the 2 weeks one was the condition that was imposed in 2013, and they now applying to vary that condition so that it wasn't so robust. But so when they first applied, they wanted it to just say occasional overnight holiday accommodation, but we feel that would be too relaxed, and that's why we've put the wording in to say 1st of March and the 31st. But you are correct, it doesn't stop them letting it out to anybody other than friends or family.
Yeah. So that's the main change in the condition.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question, Joe. Can we just see any photographs of the location of this building, this construction?
The only photograph I've got was the aerial photograph. I'll have to share it with you again, go back. Well, we've got the elevations as it was built, and then I've just got the aerial photograph, but I haven't got an actual photograph of it from the ground.
Can we go south on that photograph?
No, because it's on my PowerPoint and not a Google.
Okay,
Google Maps,
if we go back to the previous location one, then we've got not the photograph, but the location sketch.
That one.
This is where we have the sensitive marsh area. I don't know how many people are familiar with Charmouth Beach, but this is a very sensitive location because there's nothing between this building and the beach, and you have the marsh there. So I do question why there should be any variation from the original descriptions.
Well, that's what they're applying for, Chairman. They're asking to vary the condition, but there's no physical alteration at all. It would just be the period that they could let it out. They could let it out for a longer period instead of just those 2 weeks.
Yes, Councillor Kate Weller.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm inclined to agree with Charmouth Town Council that the conditions as they currently stand seem to be adequate. What you could have there is almost permanent occupation for nearly 9 months of the year, whether that is just one family or whether it's a number of families. It then becomes quite a different proposition than what it was at the time that it was first proposed. The current permissions seem to me to be adequate for what this actually is.
Right, thank you, Councillor Weller. Does anybody else have any comments?
Chair, it's Anne Collins. Can I just comment, please?
Yes.
I think I would just say that members may feel the existing conditions are adequate, but if you were looking to recommend refusal of this application, what harm the variation of the condition would cause would need to be identified in order for officers to potentially draft a reason for refusal. And I haven't yet heard anything sort of in terms of the harm. This is obviously a built structure rather than a caravan or camping site, but we have recently, all local planning authorities have had a recent ministerial statement from central government about looking to be flexible and relaxed approach in respect to extending the season of camping and static caravan and caravan accommodation in order to sort of help the UK economy in recovery from COVID-19. So that may be something that members want to bear in mind as well when considering this application.
Members, does anybody else have any comments? Councillor Weller, are you minded to recommend refusal?
No, in view of what Anne Collins has just said, I'm happy to go with the recommendation.
Councillor Sue Cocking?
I would recommend that we approve this application, because it just clarifies exactly what it can be used for and what it can't be used for, and the dates. And as we all know, people are doing a lot more staycations, so it's just encouraging people to stay at home more, and if it's viable, then it just makes it more clear. So I would approve this application. That's my.
And Anne, are we able to just restrict this to the owner's own overnight use?
Chair, I mean, we obviously did in the past looking at restricting to owners and family and friends. That's not something I've come across, and I'd probably be grateful for Phil Crowther's input in terms of if members were looking to do that moving forward, the legality of that condition.
Mr. Crowther? Could the committee restrict this to owners and friends overnight accommodation?
Well, I'd go back to Chairman, the tests for imposing conditions which are set out in the circular, and broadly they have to be for a planning purpose and reasonable and proportionate and enforceable. The question that I would ask is what is the planning harm that is caused by having it occupied on a commercial basis as opposed to family and friends? It would seem to me that in planning terms that may be a difficult distinction to make, and it may well be unreasonable to have that kind of restriction. But if members feel that there is a good planning reason to do that, then that's a decision for them.
I'm going to ask Joe Riley a question, if I may. Lighting. If this is let commercially, presumably for health and safety, there will need to be reasonable lighting. Yet this is a very sensitive coastal location. Have you looked into that matter?
No, we haven't looked at any physical changes, because the proposal isn't suggesting any development or any physical changes. It is literally suggesting changes to the wording. If they wanted to put light in, then we'd have to see if that was development, and they would have to apply for planning permission for development however that lighting is going to be.
Right, thank you. Okay, members. So I think we have a proposal from Sue Cocking for approval. Do we have a seconder?
Yes,
Happy to.
Chairman.
I think Councillor David Shortale got that. So we will just go through the list of members in order. Councillor Clayton.
Approved, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. Councillor Cocking for the record.
Approved, Chairman.
Councillor Dunseith.
Approve.
Councillor Nick Ireland.
Approve.
Councillor David Shortale for the record.
Approved, Chairman.
Councillor Sarah Williams.
Approve.
Councillor Weller.
Approve.
And I will abstain. Thank you. So this application has been approved. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, everyone. Do we have any urgent items, Denise?
Notified of anything urgent, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. So this meeting is closed and we convene tomorrow morning. Okay, thank you very much and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes.